So first, it's just simply for aesthetic. I want a footprint. Two, it's also meant to get your walls as consistent and even throughout the form as possible. So it's not only to make your pieces lighter, but it's more specifically by the act of taking away clay, it's getting lighter, but you're taking away clay because you're looking to get these walls as even as these walls. So again, we're not gonna make anything that's already skinny any skinnier. We're gonna tackle what's thicker, which is always the bottom of our bowls. So that, that's why I cut that one piece in half when I first, I still have the carcass. Where the walls, as even as this, as even as the foot ring. So making those rulers at the beginning, super important. First is getting the length of the base of your bowl. And this will be different depending on what kind of bowl shapes everyone has. And it's not an exact ruler, but you want to get pretty close to the diameter of the floor. So it'll be different. If anyone produces more of like that, if you don't really have a distinction of where the floor and the wall meet, like stages, realistically yours is gonna be it's gonna be more narrow. I would say even make it skinnier than that. Because in terms of the physics of what I'm gonna call out you with your bowl. Can you show it? So that foot was actually more narrow than it should be for that form. Because what we don't want is after you make the foot, there shouldn't be this undercut that's floating. Better, yeah. Because the foot ring should really levitate it from the floor without it having lift, not levitate. That's more of a levitate. It should just be like kind of propped up. And it depends, because and this is the other thing that we can't. There's no trick. We can make this ruler so we know how wide to make our foot ring, but we can't remember what the curve of our walls are. So individually, you kind of have to remember what this shape is, right? Is it a straight wall? Does it curve in? Remember that, because that's the shape you're gonna mimic on the outside. So again, if your piece is very domed on the inside, you're gonna have a finished piece that's domed. If you have a piece that's a bit more on the cylindrical side, that means the form will be more cylindrical in the finish. If you have something that has a bit more of a flared out tapered lip, then after you trim, you're gonna have a tapered out wall. So just remember those things too. Because there's a lot from watching everyone who starts throwing for the first time, everyone's always worried about the final finish aesthetic. That they take advantage of trimming that they could design the shape they always wanted, but then they're left with a heavy piece because the inside looks like this when they wanted the outside to look like that. Oh. So you just follow whatever you set yourself up aesthetically. Just follow that, and then the next ruler we're gonna make is how deep the bottom is. So again, you're gonna make this coin, and where's my little? When your clay's leather hard, it should be friendly enough to stab. So again, just like when we check while we're throwing, you're gonna stab the piece, hit the bottom, place your finger on the base of your bowl, pull it out, and mark it on the coin. So the best way to understand how to read this is the amount of clay you have. You need to trim a certain amount away to create the new depth, the new thickness of the floor of your piece. Typically, you want your thickness to be 1/4 of an inch. So that's about 1/4 of an inch left. So I'm going to be taking away about 2/3 from this bowl, so that the remaining amount is about 1/4 of an inch. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. 2/3.
With this particular bowl.
Okay.
I just want the leftover to always be 1/4 of an inch. So again, if yours was very shallow, Like if your needle only went this deep, then you're only trimming a little bit away. And that means you're not going to have as much of a defined foot. Because that means you're only left with, like, your foot's only going to be that tall. All right. And again, the friendly part of leather hard is after you make that hole, you should be able to just rub your finger and cover the hole. And then glaze will also just patch that hole up. We trim on the metal heads because the metal will be friendlier surface for the clay to stick on when it's leather hard. And we have these rings that can act as a bullseye. So not everyone's gonna have perfectly symmetrical bowls. So there won't be a true center. There'll be like a where it's centered the most. And these are a few decisions you can make. If you feel like your lip isn't too wonky, but maybe your walls are, use the lip as the centering goal. So when you test to see if it's level, don't test it along the walls of the piece, test it along the floor. Or if it's the opposite, what if your lip is wonky? Let's say it accidentally got a bit more oblong, then you might want to center more from the base. It depends on what state your bowl's at. So yours is pretty. Oh, especially if you set yourself up when you finish throwing that there wasn't too much of a clay skirt, then the base will always be the best. The best area, yeah.
To center it from?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
Professor?
Yes.
I know we're trimming the bottoms, but can we trim the tops too? No?
No, so a reminder that during the act of throwing, the two things you have control on is how you finish the rim and how the interior looks. Because we don't touch those when we trim. So again, if you wanted a certain shape, that's what the inside had to look like. The lip is you clean it up before you trim. But then there's also like, so looking at your bowl specifically, after I finish trimming this bowl, I'll show like the actual little blemishing finishes up. Because I think that's all, is it mainly the rim, the lip of that?
Yeah.
It looks level to me, so it's just more when we're done trimming. I'm going to show you with this bowl how to finish it so you get a nice, like, cleaner looking lip. But yeah, so spin the wheel. I'm going to slowly approach the piece with the needle tool until I scratch it, and I'm going to stop. So that's only scratching the part that sticks out the most. I face that scratch side towards myself, center it with myself, and then I'm going to gently push towards the center. And then I'll erase it by smoothing out that line. Spin again. And the goal is that when you drop your needle tool, it becomes a continuous line. If it's not perfectly symmetrical, then the next best goal is that it's a lot of scratches everywhere. So for this bowl, it's those little scratches everywhere.
Oh, okay. Oh,
And so when it comes to making the nut, has anyone had a bowl fly out on them yet? No? Okay. Oh. So, but again, just a reminder of how to put these on. Always place your hand on top of your bowl so it doesn't shift as you place them. Gently pack them. So we don't want to smear the clay into it. You want to gently pack it in so it still keeps its shape. And we're wedging it between the wall of the piece, the base of the wheel, and into that kind of undercut crevice where the two meet. Because the more you pulverize the clay nuts to hold in place, the weaker they are. So you don't want to make them into pancakes. And always start with one side, do the opposite side next, and then do the two perpendicular sides after that. All right. So before we get started, I'm gonna place the ruler, and the ruler you kind of just eyeball in the center. It's not like an exact, measurement. And then you're just gonna create a notch on one edge of that ruler. That notch you're creating essentially is the furthest width of the foot ring, the exterior of the foot ring. So again, I'm just gonna gently spin the wheel, do my best to drop the needle tool over where that notch is. And again, keep your tool steady
Okay, I gotcha.
to create that perfect circle. Do your best not to make it move. And then a foot ring usually is also 1/4 of an inch. However, if you feel like you're still having a bit trouble, it's okay to make the foot ring, the base of the foot ring, a little wider. But 1/4 of an inch is usually what the finishing aesthetic for a foot ring is.
So the first circle is the outside of the foot.
Yeah, and the second circle is the inside. So the gap that we form is the actual foot ring. And everything will be subtracted within the inner circle and outside of the exterior circle. Theoretically, you're only going to trim the interior gap to make sure that you have a level floor. But usually that's easier to do when you take away the clay from these two other areas. Do you have a question? No. And then this was brought up, but sometimes, again, depending on how you set up the piece, the foot, you might start off with something very asymmetric in terms of what you need to trim off. So you can take that same trick that we do with the needle tool when we're centering the clay, where you kind of gently approach the needle tool until it hits the clay, then you stop. You do the same thing with the trimming tool. So if something's a bit uneven, just slowly approach the clay. As soon as your trimming tool hits it, just leave it there. Let it skim off whatever inconsistent bit you have, and then move on to the next section that's a bit wonky. And it'll get more and more tucked in and a bit more and more even. But honestly, when it comes to trimming, the real trick to get used to it is speed. Speed is your best friend. The slower the wheel goes, that's the more concentration you have to put into it. If the wheel's going slow, that means you have to keep your hands steadier even longer. And that could be an endurance challenge. So don't be afraid to really get the speed of the wheel going. The only real danger to going too fast on the wheel is if the nugs weren't fully secure, your piece could go flying. But also the trimming tool, if you don't angle it correctly, you can create that moment where you actually hook the clay and it dislodges the piece. However, you kind of have to keep playing with the angle of the trimming tool. That becomes the other thing, is that there is no real there's an accurate way to use it, but there's a lot of finessing you can do with it that really unlocks your understanding of how the tool works. It's like when people who do calligraphy, like the way you do a certain brush stroke, the amount of pressure you put down creates the different characters that you can write with. So same thing as the trimming tool. Understand what it means if you push too hard, if you don't push hard enough, if you angle it parallel to the wheel, angle it perpendicular to the wheel, and the angles in between that, along with pivoting the tool as well. All those different things you're just going to learn throughout time. The more you trim, the more you get to finesse and practice with these modes. So the first trick I like to do is usually remove all the excess clay from the exterior ring. That's like my first goal, because that's usually what's the most uneven with the clay. So there's a few things that I recommend. One is, again, if you're not a steady person, if you're still having trouble allowing the piece to flow underneath the tool and not have your tool move, then always brace the tool with two hands. Because again, until you could get that steady, you don't want that situation where the tool is moving with the clay. Because then that means you're never getting an even cut. You're only getting even cuts if the clay can move, but you stay pretty still. The other move I do is once you are comfortable with that, I keep the other hand on the clay itself because it's just my physical sensory way of making sure things are feeling more and more even as I go. For the most part, the straight edge side of the double-headed trimming tool becomes the perfect template for a foot ring. So again, I start off by just doing my best to kind of trim off this skirt, trying to make sure whatever wall I have, I'm trying to make that line as linear as possible. Also, when you're trimming, it's almost like going back to how coning works, right? You put a lot of pressure at the beginning, but as you move up, you back off on that pressure. Same thing with trimming along a wall. You're gonna gut more clay from the base, but as you make your way down the wall towards the lip of your bowl, you're backing off. Because again, your walls are already as skinny as they should be. It's that base that has the extra clay. Once I take a good enough away, I kind of just go for it, and I do my best to really line this up so it's parallel with what the foot ring will become.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just gonna tackle it towards the center. So again, go slow to make sure that you're cutting it consistently. Speed helps you with this, because again, if you're going slow, then you have to sit here forever to make sure you have something even. It's good to back off before you really commit to getting to that line, because again, you want to make sure this is as crisp and clean as possible. So before I go any further, just to use this as a reference point. So I realistically, where I'm at, I've only gotten this deep, right? That gap there kind of reflects that mark there. I took away at least that much. Does that make sense? Because again, the top of this foot ring right now is technically the end of this line. And so what I just cut from here, I essentially took that away. So again, that means I still have plenty to go off of. So because of that, before I commit to getting to that foot ring, I'm actually going to reset and make this foot ring a bit taller.
Is it better to make it taller?
Yes, because for the most part, we probably have an uneven floor. Like it's very subtle with this one, but there's a little rocking. So the more you set yourself up, the more you can forgive carving away. There's something else to double check with this. And again, if I would grab this, if I set up what the height or width of this tool is, it pretty much lines up where I have to stop.
Oh.
So this is a lucky bowl where, and that's essentially what I did.
Oh,
So what that
you know
means is I should not go any deeper than that.
Okay, got it.
So the next move is, I'm gonna leave this right now. Just kind of keep that extra cushion. I'm gonna clean this wall. So this is what you don't want. You don't want this overhang. Because theoretically, where the foot ends is where the wall should start. If the inside of your bowl doesn't look like that, if it looks curved, then just make sure you make this curve. And it's usually as simple as tackling that corner. Whatever that corner of where it like, cut that out. So before I move on, I'm gonna leave that extra room just in case if I mess up with the interior. But with the interior, I do the same thing where, actually I don't do the same thing. With the outer ring, I start from the edge and then stop there. What I like to do is actually start right at the line for the interior and set that up. And I usually do that with using the corner of this tool, where I'm just gonna drop it right there. So I didn't go quite deep yet, because realistically, the inside depth should match the outside depth. I probably went only halfway down that height, just so I could start to slowly take the rest away. This is the easiest way I know how to take away long stretches of surface area in clay, is I drop that corner again on the edge of that mound to make another ring like that. And then I'll drop the corner into that mound.
Doing concentric rings.
And then go into that round. And then I switch to the wide one. I usually don't go for this right away because unless you have really good control and understanding on how to angle this properly, it's hard to get this consistent. These little peaks become a friendlier surface for this to gut through. So now I can keep gutting until I lose those gaps. And then I can switch back and kind of reset.
And now you've gone to the round end.
Just to show that there actually is not like, you could do every trick with every tool. So again, always play around with the tools. You're only gonna know what they do when you use them. And then some of you might actually get this. So depending how thick your piece was, as you start trimming, you're actually gonna reveal wetter clay. So it is getting a little soft.
Oh.
And it's always gonna be the interior ring is when you kind of face that. So honestly, I'm gonna stop here for now because
So you
this
would let it
just
dry
needs
a
to
little
breathe
bit
a bit.
more. Okay.
We've exposed the inner layer of the clay. I'm gonna let it spin on this wheel, let it air out. Because honestly, the finishing moves I have to do is just crisp up those foot rings.
And so there's still like a line around?
Yeah, so
Or would you go into the
yeah,
where that
so
line is?
I'll do that right now because I am confident with that. So I'm just gonna commit and lock in that foot ring.
So you first give yourself more room.
Yeah,
and
just
then
before
go.
like committing, just to play it
Okay.
safe. Once you gain the confidence, then those are steps you don't even have to do anymore. You could just like, you know, at some point you won't even have to do the setup. At some point you won't need to make those rulers anymore. You'll be like, because it does become a bit muscle memory of understanding of like, oh yeah, my walls were this thin. I know how much clay I left. So the last thing that becomes tricky is the top here. So to clean up the top, you do the same thing as when I was making the circles, where I'm just gonna do my best just to nick a little bit away, just a little bit.
And you're still using the corner.
The corner, yeah. And then again, this is the perfect template because this width also lines up with the width of the foot ring, so you can drop it straight down and it helps make a level foot. And again, once this gets drier, I'll be able to
Flatten that edge
flatten
out.
that edge out. But yeah, it definitely needs to just air out a bit.
Okay.
So sometimes just give yourself a break,
Yeah.
stretch. Okay, so one way with the outside, so if you were done, like after trimming,
Yeah, like mine has like fingerprints and
so one way, if you still have it on the wheel, is I use the wooden tools to essentially buff out the exterior.
Oh, that's right.
So as it
remember
spins,
you
I
did
just
that.
gently compress the clay with the wooden tool.
get it wet.
I just dust off the tool, but it's not wet.
And then I was struggling with the little stoppers at the bottom. Like there's a clear demarcation from when I was doing everything out, and then I couldn't get past that marker. at the bottom.
So the trick is you just have to train yourself to really taper off and stop as you go down.
Okay.
Because theoretically the walls down there should never have to get skinnier.
Yeah. Okay.
Then the other finishing touch, so you can use a little bit, so once it's off the wheel, like to clean the inside and the outside of any other blemishes, you can gently dampen it with a sponge, but don't rely too much on the sponge. Because some of these clays, like maybe not so much the fresh B-Mix, but if you're starting to use like recycled B-Mix, it'll get a bit grittier. But as you dampen it, use your finger. You'll be surprised how easy your finger ends up just cleaning those blemishes. And any nitpicky blemishes you can't remove, glaze will cover them up. Like a fingerprint, you won't even see after glaze is on it. But try not to rely too much on excess amount of water to smooth your pieces out. Sometimes they do become friendlier when you do let them dry out. So sometimes, I told some of my students on Saturday that when you finish a piece, you don't have to take it outside right away. When things get bone dry, a little bit of water goes a long way. So I just take a sponge.
And then you can trim
Oh, not trim it. The finishing touches, like just touch it up. So I'm just doing a few passes around the lip because the lip was pretty sharp beforehand.
And
it's
that will
still
take
soft.
off that sharp edge doing
Yeah.
that? Oh.
So especially like this foot ring is really sharp from what I left. When I but the sponge bevels it really well at this stage, at the bone dry stage.
Okay.
And then like the inside too, there's like some weird like slip marks that I have. Just like a quick wipe. Sometimes I literally just flake it off. Like you can gently sand. But a lot of the other little things, glaze will cover it.
Okay.